You know, what if the reason you are burnt out at work has nothing to do with how many hours you are putting in?
Right.
I mean, we always talk about the grind, but what if it has everything to do with the physical temperature of your daily routine?
That is such an interesting way to frame it. Temperature.
Yeah, because we often treat passion like a spontaneous weather event, you know?
Oh, totally. Like you were just walking down the street and bam!
Exactly. The clouds part, and suddenly you are struck by the lightning bolt of absolute clarity about your life's purpose.
Right, the whole epiphany myth.
Yeah, and if you haven't been struck by that lightning, you just assume, well, I guess I'm doomed to be uninspired forever.
That lightning strike myth is just incredibly pervasive. It frames motivation as this permanent binary state.
You either have it or you don't.
Exactly. You either possess the fire or you are just coal.
Mm-hmm.
But when we actually analyze long-term human drive, that framework just completely collapses.
It really does.
Sustaining purpose isn't about waiting for a random spark. It requires deliberate, constant regulation of your internal climate.
Which brings us to the really fascinating source we are looking at today. It tackles this exact problem.
It's a great piece.
Yeah, it is a transcript of a Sunday school lesson, actually, delivered by a speaker named Josh Sexton on March 9th, 2025. It's titled The Goldilocks Zone.
Which is such a cool title.
It really is. So the mission for our deep dive today is to explore how this source takes a concept straight out of astronomy and uses it as a metaphor for human passion, our sense of purpose, and our spiritual equilibrium.
Right, because for anyone unfamiliar, the astronomical Goldilocks zone is that perfect orbital distance from a star.
Not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly. The planet isn't boiling, it isn't freezing, it is sitting precisely at the temperature required for liquid water.
And therefore life.
Right, for life to exist. And the source takes that astrophysical reality and maps it directly onto human zeal.
I love that.
It argues that we possess our own internal Goldilocks zones. To function properly, we cannot be entirely devoid of heat.
Right.
Nor can we be burning so violently that we destroy everything in our orbit. We have to find and maintain that critical life-sustaining balance.
Okay, let's unpack this, because while the source text is explicitly rooted in Christian theology and biblical mandates, the psychological architecture underneath it,
The mechanics of it.
exactly, the mechanics, the insights about what actually motivates us, how we build resistance to burnout, how we forge a meaningful existence, those mechanics apply to absolutely anyone trying to navigate their life.
Absolutely. They're universal.
We should probably start by defining what this source actually means when it talks about passion, though, because it takes a very physical approach to the word.
It really does. The text anchors the abstract concept of passion to the literal physics of heat and fire.
Which is a cool shift in perspective.
Yeah, it's not treating passion as just, fleeting emotion. It treats it as the active temperature of your engagement with the world. And to illustrate why that temperature matters, the speaker examines a concept that appears frequently in biblical texts, specifically referencing Psalms 51.16.
Right. The one praising a broken and contrite heart.
Exactly.
I have to admit, when I was reading through the source material, I immediately bristled at the word brokenness.
Oh, for sure. It's a tough word.
It is. To modern sensibilities, telling someone they need to be broken sounds objectively terrible.
Right.
It conjures up images of trauma, or being defeated, or just having your spirit completely crushed. But looking closely at the mechanics the speaker describes, that negative interpretation kind of misses the point entirely.
It totally misses it. The text actually uses a mechanical metaphor that completely changes the definition of that word.
The blacksmithing.
Yes. The source compares the human heart, or human habit, really, to a blacksmith working with metal.
Yeah, the blacksmith analogy really clarified this for me. I mean, if a blacksmith places a piece of cold iron on an anvil, that metal is fiercely resistant to change.
That's rigid.
Extremely rigid. You can strike it with a heavy hammer all day long, and the only thing you will accomplish is exhausting yourself.
You'll just dent the hammer.
Right. The metal won't yield. But if you apply intense heat, if you plunge that iron into the fire, the molecular structure actually changes.
It becomes malleable.
Yes, it willingly yields to the hammer. So the brokenness the text is advocating for isn't about being shattered into useless shards of glass.
Right.
It's about being melted down so you can be forged into a stronger, more useful tool.
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychological truth about how human beings actually enact change.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the text points out a profound limitation of human intellect. Reason alone is rarely sufficient to override established behavior.
Oh, I feel that.
We all do. You might intellectually know that you need to be more patient with your kids, or that you need to stop procrastinating.
Or that holding on to a grudge is actively ruining your mental health.
Exactly. But that intellectual knowledge is just a hammer hitting cold iron. Without the heat of emotional propulsion, the cold resistance of human habit is simply too dense to bend.
The text includes this fantastic quote. It says, "Nothing great in the world has ever been accomplished without passion."
It's so true.
It is. Reason is just the targeting system. It tells you where you need to go. But passion is the engine thrust.
The fuel.
Yeah, it is the raw energy required to actually break the gravitational pull of your old habits.
But if passion is the thermal energy that makes us malleable and drives us forward, we have to identify the fuel source for that fire.
Right, where does the heat actually come from?
Well, the text argues that the heat of our passion is directly proportional to the scale of our purpose.
The scale of our purpose, okay.
Yeah, and to illustrate this, the speaker offers a very grounded, vulnerable comparison from his own life.
This part was super relatable.
It really was. He looks at his wife, Heather, who is a nurse, and he notes that she is intensely passionate about her calling,
She's running hot.
running at a high temperature nearly all the time, because the daily reality of her job involves actively saving human lives.
Right, the stakes are literally life and death.
Exactly.
Then he looks at his own job at the time, which involved delivering pieces of paper.
Right. He was a courier or a mail carrier.
Yeah, he describes dropping off bills and advertisements that the recipients didn't even want. And he was grateful for the paycheck, but he admits he felt absolutely zero fire for the work.
Understandably so.
Right, because the purpose of delivering junk mail simply wasn't large enough to spark a psychological fire.
It's a stark contrast, but it highlights a really common modern crisis. The mundane nature of a task can literally starve the brain of the necessary friction to create heat.
Wow, starve the brain of friction.
Yeah, so if a person feels overwhelmed by apathy in their career, the text suggests evaluating the sheer scale of the outcome. You might be agonizing over why you lack drive, when the reality is you're psychologically wired to save lives. But your current environment only asks you to deliver paper.
Which poses a massive problem if you don't actually know what your life-saving purpose is supposed to be.
Right.
I mean, if you are stuck delivering paper, how do you figure out where your fire is actually hiding?
That is the million-dollar question.
And the source offers this incredibly practical diagnostic tool that I just haven't stopped thinking about. It calls it the weather test.
Oh, the weather test is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's such a good behavioral indicator because it bypasses what we think we care about
Yeah.
and looks at what our brains naturally gravitate toward.
Right. It looks at the actual evidence.
Exactly. The premise is this. Imagine sitting down next to an acquaintance. You will likely spend the first 5 to 10 minutes discussing the weather or the traffic or some other form of standard social lubrication.
Just normal small talk.
Normal small talk.
Yeah.
But once those pleasantries are exhausted, what is the topic you inevitably pilot the conversation toward? What is the subject that, when introduced, causes you to physically lean forward in your chair?
I love this because it's just so revealing. I mean, if I'm taking the weather test the second the small talk ends, I am desperately trying to steer the conversation toward obscure historical mysteries.
Of course you are.
Or like some bizarre new scientific discovery I just read about. My volume goes up, I start talking faster. What is yours?
Oh, for me, it's probably behavioral economics or urban planning.
Really?
Oh, yeah. If someone mentions how a city's public transit layout affects socioeconomic mobility, I completely lose track of time. I could debate the merits of mixed-use zoning for hours.
And that is exactly what the source is getting at. You have to look for the physical clues.
The bodily reaction.
Yeah, the speaker points out that our bodies betray our true devotions. What makes your face physically light up?
Right.
For some people, it's hearing their partner's name. For others, it's a fanatical dedication to a sports team.
Oh, the sports fans.
The text specifically calls out the guys who paint their bare chests and stand in freezing stadiums for 3 hours just to watch a football game.
It's so tempting to dismiss the chest-painting sports fan as trivial. But from a psychological standpoint, it's actually a perfect case study in natural energy flow.
How so?
Well, when a person is operating outside the constraints of obligation, like when they aren't being paid to care, they aren't being forced to participate, where does their cognitive surplus go?
Oh, I see.
The weather test reveals the baseline of your internal devotion. It shows you the raw material you have to work with when trying to build a larger, more sustainable fire.
Here is where it gets really interesting, though.
Hmm.
The source takes all of this psychological groundwork, how to identify passion, how it makes us malleable, and it just completely shifts the paradigm.
Right, into the spiritual realm.
Exactly. Within the context of faith, the speaker argues that maintaining this fiery enthusiasm is not just a nice bonus for a happy life. It is presented as a strict, non-negotiable spiritual mandate.
The text leans heavily on a series of biblical directives to establish this argument.
Mm-hmm.
It cites Romans 12:11, which instructs believers to never be lacking in zeal.
And we're lacking.
Right, and it points to Matthew 3:11, which describes a baptism not just of water, but of the Holy Spirit and of fire.
There's that heat again.
Exactly. And perhaps most famously, it references Revelation 3:15-16, which delivers a severe warning to a community that has become lukewarm.
And neither hot nor cold.
Right, stating that this tepid state is so repulsive to the divine that they will literally be spat out.
Now, the demand for a temperature response might seem arbitrary at first glance. Like, why does the temperature of our belief matter as much as the belief itself?
It's a fair question.
And the source answers this through what I'll call the bacteria analogy.
This was wild.
It really was. The speaker notes that God is defined as the infinite creator of the entire cosmos. And to put that scale into perspective, human beings are functionally smaller than tiny bacteria compared to the vastness of the universe.
We are microscopic.
Right. I mean, we brush our teeth and eradicate millions of bacteria without a second thought. Yet the core theological premise here is that the infinite creator of billions of galaxies knows and cares deeply for each individual human.
It's staggering.
It is, and the text argues that if you genuinely comprehend that reality, it should instantly ignite an overwhelming, consuming passion.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text is making a profound philosophical argument about cognitive dissonance.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, a stagnant, apathetic response to an infinite, universe-altering concept is framed as a fundamental failure of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. If someone told you that you just won the largest lottery in human history, and your response was just a slight shrug and a yawn, the logical conclusion wouldn't just be that you lack emotion.
Right, people would think you didn't hear them.
Exactly. The conclusion would be that you didn't actually understand the words that were spoken to you. So a lack of passion in the face of the infinite isn't viewed merely as an emotional deficit.
It's an intellectual failure.
Precisely. It's a failure to grasp the sheer magnitude of reality.
To show what it looks like when someone actually grasps that magnitude, the text brings up the historical account of King David.
Oh, this is a great example.
When the Ark of the Covenant was brought into Jerusalem, David was so overcome with enthusiasm that he danced through the streets with all his might.
Right.
He danced so fiercely that his royal garments were literally falling off. And the text pairs this with the biblical concept of worshiping in spirit and truth.
Right, which it defines very specifically.
Yes. It defines spirit as being entirely lively, the absolute opposite of dead or stagnant, and truth as being authentic, without any protective masks or pretenses.
David's behavior is the ultimate manifestation of internal belief overriding external decorum. The external action perfectly matches the internal temperature.
Which creates a stark contrast with another story from the text. The speaker mentions an anecdote about a man named Brandon.
Oh, poor Brandon.
Poor Brandon. He attended church in a meticulously tailored, expensive suit, but he was so concerned about wrinkling his jacket or looking undignified that he stood completely rigid and stiff the entire time.
Completely frozen.
Yeah, and you put David and Brandon next to each other, and you see the core tension. David loses his clothes in pure, unbridled enthusiasm, while Brandon is paralyzed by the fear of looking foolish.
It's such a vivid image.
It forces you to ask, how often do we let our own suits, our obsession with social appearances, our desire to look cool, collected, and sophisticated act as a fire retardant on our actual passions?
That is such a good point. We constantly self-regulate to fit into acceptable social molds, and in doing so, we often smother the exact heat required to live a meaningful life.
Wow, yeah.
But that brings us to the crucial pivot in the Goldilocks metaphor. A planet can be too cold for life, but it can also be too close to the sun.
Oh, right.
If we accept that Brandon's rigid coldness is a failure to grasp the purpose, we also have to confront the danger of a fire that burns out of control.
Because we've all seen what happens when someone is consumed by a cause to the point of toxicity.
Absolutely. And the source is hyper-aware of this danger. It explicitly warns against the destructive nature of unchecked passion. It points out that speaking the truth is an objectively good thing, but speaking the truth without love, which is a classic symptom of someone running way too hot, is incredibly damaging.
It burns people up.
Exactly. When a person becomes overzealous, their priorities warp. The mission becomes more important than the people the mission was supposed to serve. The text quotes a really poignant line from the book of Proverbs. Desire without knowledge is not good. How much more will hasty feet mince away?
It's the difference between a controlled burn that clears dead brush and a wildfire that just levels a neighborhood.
That's a great analogy.
I was thinking about how to visualize this, and my mind went to a nuclear reactor. Passion, that raw, visceral drive we've been talking about, is the uranium. It contains an immense, unbelievable amount of energy, but a nuclear reactor only provides power because it has control rods.
Right, the things that absorb the excess heat.
Exactly. Knowledge, righteousness, discipline, empathy, those are the control rods. If you pull the control rods out and just let the uranium react on its own, you don't get boundless energy.
No, you get a disaster.
You get Chernobyl. You experience a catastrophic meltdown that poisons everything and everyone around you.
This raises an important question, though. Why are humans so prone to these meltdowns?
What does the source say about that?
Well, the source addresses this through a fascinating theological deep cut regarding the armor of God.
Oh, this part was so cool.
Yeah, most people familiar with the text know the New Testament version from the book of Ephesians. Humans are instructed to put on the breastplate of righteousness, the helmet of salvation, the belt of truth.
Standard Sunday school stuff.
Right. But the source points backward to the Old Testament, specifically to Isaiah 59:11, which describes God putting on his own armor.
And the inventory list is slightly different.
Significantly different. In Isaiah, God wraps himself in the cloak of zeal.
The cloak of zeal.
Yeah. So the speaker poses this brilliant question. Why is the cloak of zeal worn by God in the Old Testament, but entirely absent from the armor issued to humans in the New Testament?
Because God doesn't need control rods.
Precisely. The text's conclusion is that divine zeal is perfect because it is paired with infinite wisdom.
God can handle the heat.
God can handle the unchecked fire without it becoming destructive. But human zeal is inherently flawed.
Yeah.
Our perspective is just too limited.
Yeah.
If we wrap ourselves entirely in the cloak of zeal without the heavy armor of discipline and truth, we become toxic. We don't get the cloak of zeal because, historically speaking, when humans are handed unchecked ideological fire, we tend to launch crusades and just burn the world down.
Man, it is such an incredible metric for evaluating our own lives. Are we burning hot but completely unmoored from our actual values?
Right.
Are we generating massive amounts of heat but absolutely zero light? That is the danger of leaving the Goldilocks zone on the high end of the thermostat.
We need the heat to bend the iron of our habits, but we need the control rods of knowledge to ensure the fire doesn't consume us. That defines the parameters of the optimal zone.
But that leaves us with the most difficult practical challenge presented in the source.
The cold days?
The cold days. What do we do when the reactor is entirely cold? What happens on the days when you wake up, look at your purpose, your job, your family, or your faith, and you feel absolutely nothing?
It happens to everyone.
It does. The fuel is there, the control rods are there, but the spark is completely gone.
This was actually my favorite part of the source because it shifts from theology to a highly actionable, almost biological hack.
Yeah, the physiology of it.
Right. The speaker taps into a well-documented physiological principle. Emotions follow actions.
I always thought it was the other way around.
Most people do. The scientific term for this is the facial feedback hypothesis, or more broadly, proprioceptive feedback. We usually assume causality flows in one direction. You feel happy, therefore your brain tells your facial muscles to smile.
Right, that seems logical.
But the nervous system is actually a two-way street. The brain constantly monitors the physical state of the body to determine what emotion it should be experiencing.
So it works in reverse.
Yes. If you physically fire the muscles required to smile, those nerves send signals back to the amygdala, effectively tricking the brain into releasing dopamine and serotonin.
That's amazing.
The physical action creates the emotional reality.
And the source takes that neurological quirk and applies it directly to the days when your fire is out. It argues that on the days you are physically exhausted, or you are stressed about bills, or you simply want to retreat to the back row of your life and disengage, that is precisely the moment you must force a physical action.
You have to move.
Yeah. In a worship setting, that means intentionally raising your hands, vocalizing, engaging your body. Now, I will be honest. When I first read this instruction to force an action you don't feel, my immediate reaction was, isn't this just fake it till you make it?
Sure, that's the obvious critique.
Right. Isn't that fundamentally inauthentic? If I'm physically engaging but my heart is cold, aren't I just being a hypocrite?
It's the most common critique of behavioral activation. But the text provides a really profound reframe for that dissonance. It doesn't view forcing the action as faking it. It views it as a sacrifice.
Yes. The phrase the text uses is the sacrifice of praise. When you take action despite feeling nothing, you aren't lying.
Not at all.
You are intentionally choosing to honor a commitment over a temporary mood. A sacrifice costs you something.
Right.
In this case, it costs you your comfort. Giving energy specifically because it is difficult requires a much deeper level of dedication than only participating when you feel a spontaneous surge of inspiration.
The speaker grounds this action plan in a specific formula from the book of Revelation, actually.
What's the formula?
The text references a letter written to the church in Ephesus, which was a community explicitly called out for having lost its first love, meaning their passion had gone cold.
Okay.
The formula provided to reignite that fire is 3 sequential steps. Consider how far you have fallen, repent, and do the things you did at first.
Do the things you did at first. That is an action verb.
Notice what is absent from that formula. It doesn't say, wait patiently until you feel the urge to do the things you did at first.
Right, there's no waiting.
It mandates immediate physical initiation. You strike the match through physical discipline, trusting that the thermal energy of the emotion will eventually catch up to the spark of the action.
So what does this all mean? We've journeyed through a pretty remarkable framework today.
We really have.
We discovered that passion isn't a magical lightning strike. It's the necessary thermal energy required to make the cold iron of our stubborn habits malleable.
Exactly.
We saw through the weather test that our brains naturally want to care about things, and we need a purpose large enough to act as fuel so we aren't just psychologically delivering junk mail. We explored the humbling reality of our scale in the universe and why hiding our fire behind the suit of social expectation just robs us of our vitality.
We also confronted the danger of the other extreme, the necessity of keeping our internal nuclear reactor in check with the control rods of knowledge and empathy, recognizing that zeal without wisdom is a recipe for destruction.
A total meltdown.
Right. And finally, we learned the biological and spiritual hack for the days the fire goes out, the willingness to sacrifice our comfort and let our physical actions drag our emotions back to life.
Yeah.
I'd invite you, right now, to take a calm, honest inventory of your own internal climate. Which end of the Goldilocks zone are you currently drifting toward?
Such a good question.
Are you freezing in a state of cynical apathy, waiting for a feeling that is never going to spontaneously arrive? Or are you burning up, sprinting forward with a blind, toxic zeal that is quietly destroying the relationships and structures around you? Regulating that spiritual thermostat isn't a one-time event. It's the daily practice of a meaningful life.
You aren't at the mercy of the weather. You have your hand on the dial. And that leaves us with one final thought for you to mull over today as you go back to your routine.
What's that?
Well, if the science and the theology hold true, if emotions really do follow physical actions, what is one physical movement you can make right now, today, to artificially strike a match and reignite a passion you've allowed to go cold?
Until next time.
Thanks for diving deep with us.